Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This week, a case of racist and homophobic language and boast about killing people in the line of duty leads to the firing of Lexington's police chief. We'll hear recordings from that law enforcement officer, and we'll talk about the man who broke the story, investigative reporter Jerry Mitchell. Also, Mississippi Congressman Michael Guest co-sponsors a bill to set a nationwide abortion ban after 6 weeks. But in recent weeks, he told this program that such laws should be left to state governments. Those stories and much more this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. People are still talking about the firing of the police chief in the small Mississippi town of Lexington. That community has a new interim police chief after the old chief was fired by the Board of Aldermen. The firing occurred Wednesday morning after a publication of an audio recording of Chief Sam Dobbins. 12 News' Tal Ta has more on this case. It includes audio which we've censored due to its offensive nature.
Sam Dobbins was police chief for about 1 year. He was booted after audio recordings surfaced of him using racial slurs and derogatory remarks.
I knew once I get him to talking, he's going to say something that was out of line.
Former Lexington officer Robert Lee Hooker made the recordings and decided to leave the force, citing a toxic workplace under Dobbins.
I have shot and killed in the line of duty 13 different people. I shot that 119 times.
Hooker isn't surprised.
I've seen him pull over people and not appropriately pulling them over. It wasn't legal.
The nearly 17-minute recording was obtained by the civil rights group Julian that bills itself as an international human rights organization.
It was a little shocking.
Especially in the last couple of days, we've gotten even more because people are now, they're not scared.
In the recording, Dobbins talks about how many people he killed in the line of duty.
I don't give a if you kill a cold blood. I will articulate to fix the problem. And I'm the only man in the business here that's smart enough to do it.
According to civil rights advocates, residents in the small town of Holmes County, a predominantly black town and one of the poorest in the nation, have filed complaints with the mayor and board of aldermen claiming scores of accounts of police brutality.
There was a meeting on April 7th with a lot of coalition groups, and citizens of Lexington expressed their concerns, their grievances about the police abuse. And the day after that meeting, 3 of the most outspoken members of that meeting, the attendees, they got arrested. And so that is what led to the current onslaught. After that, the targeting just increased.
Everything's not run the right way, how it's supposed to be. It's a lot of crooked.
The decision to ultimately boot the former Lexington police chief was made in a special meeting on Wednesday.
He supposed to been gone. He been doing dirty stuff to black people in the community.
I've been asked to come back. I'm going to pray about it.
Julian, alongside the community, now calling for a federal investigation.
This is a story that first broke by the nonprofit Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. We spoke Thursday with the man who wrote the story, a center founder and veteran journalist, Jerry Mitchell. Jerry, tell us first, what do we know about this now fired police chief Sam Dobbins?
Well, he was hired by the city of Lexington about a year ago, last July, and he's been serving since then. And he's apparently worked for a number of different law enforcement agencies here in Mississippi, and that's what we know about him, at this point in time in terms of his background.
How were you able to get the audio that you recorded, and who made it in the first place?
Well, it was an officer at the time, Robert Lee Hooker, who made the audio, who basically recorded it. Happened to be a black officer, and he recorded it. And Sam Dobbins is white. And on this, so it came into the hands of Julian, which is a civil rights and human rights organization, and then they had shared it with me. And it's about a 16-minute tape of him speaking, and it's filled with all sorts of racist, homophobic, etc. Remarks and just talking about killing people. He killed 13 people, he said, in the line of duty, which I've talked to, I know a number of law enforcement officers, and I ran that number past them, and they're like, how does anybody kill that many people in the line of duty? So I don't know if it's true or not true or whatever, but it is what he said. And And what he said about particularly about the one individual, it was a black man who used the N-word toward him. He said he shot him 119 times. I'm like, wow. I mean, why would you have to shoot anyone that many times anyway, even in a self-defense situation? So, but that's what he said. And it's all on tape. And he even talks about telling the officer if he kills somebody in cold blood, he doesn't care. He'll basically take care of it for him.
Is there any record or any proof that any of this all happened?
Yeah, in fact, I'm digging into that particular killing, and it did in fact happen about 10 years ago. And trying to find out more details now. I don't really know much details about it, but this did in fact happen. Yeah.
All right, Jerry, what else did Dobbins have to say in that recording?
Well, he talks about, essentially, he answers to the board and et cetera and that kind of thing. But anyway, he just kind of makes it, just get the impression of a guy who thinks he can get away with anything. I got to be honest with you. I mean, it's just the way it kind of comes across. Like, I'm smart enough to be able to do this and get away with this is kind of what he says, which is pretty appalling. And so the city of Lexington, the Board of Aldermen met yesterday and actually fired him. It was a 3-2 vote.
What's the makeup of the Lexington police force?
Well, it's the town of Lexington is about 85% black, and the police force is mixed. It's both black and white. But the police chief has been with him is obviously white. The mayor there is white. So it's kind of a town that sits on the edge of the Delta. Obviously, it's one of the most impoverished counties in the country, not just in Mississippi, but in the country. And so they've had their challenges. I know they're real hard hit in COVID and things like that. So it's just I'm really kind of shocked at it, to be honest with you, because you wouldn't expect a white police chief who's in this position, you're over a town of 85% black, to still be using the N-word and think that's okay. And the fact that he was using a still black officer is just really as well. I mean, even if it had been a white officer, it doesn't really matter, but it was just the language, everything else. It's just incredible. Everything was MF and N-word and all these other things he's saying. It's just, I don't know. I was just very shocked by it.
Have town officials, have they had anything or much to say about this case so far?
So far, officials have not said anything about the case. I mean, there's been very quiet about it. They did admit it was a 3-2 vote, and who voted for and who voted against. And so, yeah, they've been very quiet. But obviously, I mean, the story ran Tuesday and they fired him on Wednesday. So obviously that's pretty quick response to the story. And I gather they were as appalled by it as I think most people would be by some of that language and in terms of the racist language and some of the other things he had to say.
Yeah, Julian, the civil rights group that shared this recording alleges a long track record of police in Lexington violating people's rights. What can you tell us about those claims?
Well, they've been very involved in the city of Lexington for a while in terms of working, talking to citizens. And this is not like the only thing that ever happened. This is like they have more than a dozen complaints from citizens who, said they were harassed by police, black citizens there, et cetera. And so this didn't come totally out of the blue. This was not, the citizens there have been complaining about treatment for some time. I know they had some kind of public meeting last fall even, and have had public meetings even since then. So we will see how this plays out. I don't think this is over. I think this is going to continue to have ramifications. And I know that the citizens, the interim chief, I don't know is going to satisfy the citizens who were upset with the treatment by the police department. We'll see how this plays out.
Is it possible that Dobbins could get another job in law enforcement in Mississippi or some other place where this audio recording may not be known?
Perhaps so. We'll see. I mean, I guess the difference between doing this now and doing it, 20 years ago is there's something called the internet. So it's if anyone's kind of doing their due diligence, you would actually find this on the internet. So that'll be the question. Can he get a job somewhere else? Oh, probably so.
You worked for much of your career on civil rights cases or instances when those civil rights were violated by people in power. What questions are still on your mind about this particular case, and what does it tell us about today's Mississippi?
Well, I mean, I gotta be honest, I'm just still shocked by this. And to hear someone talk about killing someone in just such graphic terms and justifying it, and I just every bit of that it sounded like something. I gotta be honest, this tape sounded like something that would have come from the 50s or 60s. It did not sound modern at all, but it is. It just was recorded. So to have a modern day police officer in America say these kinds of things is shocking. And the fact that this is still taking place, we think we're past this. We've kind of come to terms with race in this country, but as often happens with race, and it seems like race in Mississippi especially, we seem to take a few steps forward and then a few steps back. And I think this is one of those where obviously we've taken some steps back, and it makes us realize, hey, there may be some work to be done. I know the Justice Department is investigating a number of police departments around the country for some of the things that have been going on. And I think this is obviously one of those things that falls into line with what we're talking about, that kind of attitude. I think that's what came through that was so disturbing, the attitude toward killing someone black, and he just seemed to think it was nothing.
So going forward, what are you hoping to see, or what do you think we will see with this case?
Well, I know Julian is asking for an FBI investigation in this case. I don't know that'll happen, especially now that the police chief's been fired. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Jerry Mitchell with the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. Thanks again for dialing in with us and joining us.
Thank you very much.
We look at the debate over states' rights and national abortion bans when Mississippi Insight continues. Mississippi Congressman Michael Guest has co-sponsored a bill that would ban all abortions nationwide once a fetal heartbeat can be detected. 12 News' Richard Lake reports the Heartbeat Protection Act would disrupt many state laws regarding abortions, and it's not quite aligned with Congressman Guest's past statements on the matter.
I rise today in support of the life of the unborn and in support of pro-life legislation like the Heartbeat Protection Act.
Michael Guest's co-sponsorship of this federal abortion ban is a complete departure from his previous statements on the topic. Congressman Guest was featured on 12 News Mississippi Insight on June 22nd and May 26th, where he outlined his abortion access stances twice.
I believe that this is a states' rights issue. And I think the law is clear that the federal government should allow each state to be able to set their laws on the protection of life. This needs to be a state issue. We need to send this to the states, and states need to be able to set the laws that they feel are necessary to protect life.
The exception for rape and incest is one Michael Guest believes should be made when it comes to abortions. Exceptions for rape or incest are not included in this bill.
If it's a rape, incest case, I think those are all exceptions where individuals should have the ability to receive an abortion. But it would be something that I personally would ask the legislature to consider listing that as one of the potential exemptions that would allow a mother to be able to seek an abortion.
The only exception made is if the mother's life is endangered. The bill also includes fines and up to 5 years of jail time for doctors that perform abortions without checking for a fetal heartbeat. The Mississippi Abortion Access Coalition released a statement in response to this proposed legislation, saying while Congressman Guest flip-flops on whether states or the federal government should be making laws on abortion, Mississippians already said it should be neither, and we should be in charge of our futures. 12 News has reached out to Michael Guest, and according to his team, the congressman has not changed his position on abortion. Reporting in Jackson, Richard Lake, 12 News.
In another development, Mississippi's Lynn Fitch is among 17 Republican attorneys general warning Google not to limit the appearance of anti-abortion pregnancy centers in certain abortion-related search results. Google is under pressure to do so. Abortion rights advocates fear women who travel to avoid state bans may be tracked through such online data. We're back in a moment. The House Select Committee on the January 6, 2021 attack on Congress has wrapped up its summer session, but committee leaders say to expect more hearings in the months ahead and more evidence against the former President Donald Trump. Thursday's primetime hearing offered what may be the most focused session yet on Mr. Trump's actions and his inactions in stopping his supporters from their violent attack at the U.S. Capitol. One committee leader who was not present was its chairman, Democrat Benny Thompson, Mississippi's 2nd District Congressman. But he did offer this taped opening statement. Thompson explained that he's contracted COVID-19 and was staying away only as a cautionary measure.
Earlier this week, I received a positive COVID diagnosis. Per CDC guidelines, I've received the initial 2 shots and all of the boosters. Thus far, I've been blessed to experience very minimal symptoms. Because I'm still quarantined, I cannot participate in person with my colleagues. I've asked our Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney, to preside over this evening's hearing, including maintaining order in the room and swearing in our witnesses. Over the last month and a half, the Select Committee has told the story of a president who did everything in his power to overturn an election. He lied, he bullied, he betrayed his oath. He tried to destroy our democratic institutions. He summoned a mob to Washington. Afterward, on January 6th, when he knew that the assembled mob was heavily armed and angry, he commanded the mob to go to the Capitol, and he emphatically commanded the heavily armed mob to fight like hell. For the weeks between November election and January 6th, Donald Trump was a force to be reckoned with. He shrugged off the factuality and legality correct, sober advice of his knowledgeable and sensible advisors. Instead, he recklessly blazed a path of lawlessness and corruption, the cost to which democracy be damned. And then he stopped.
Thompson set the tone for the rest of the hearing. It focused heavily on the timeline over a roughly 3-hour period. That's the time between Mr. Trump's tweet encouraging his followers to march to the Capitol and the video he released telling the rioters that they had to go home. It was 2 Republicans in the party, Vice Chair Liz Cheney and committee member Adam Kinzinger, who summed up their growing case against the former president and his failure to curb the violence on that dark day in January 2021.
Whatever your politics, whatever you think about the outcome of the election, we as Americans must all agree on this. Donald Trump's conduct on January 6th was a supreme violation of his oath of office and a complete dereliction of his duty to our nation. It is a stain on our history. It is a dishonor to all those who have sacrificed and died in service of our democracy. When we present our full findings, we will recommend changes to laws and policies to guard against another January 6th. The reason that's imperative is that the forces Donald Trump ignited that day have not gone away. The militant, intolerant ideologies, the militias, the alienation and the disaffection, the weird fantasies and disinformation. They're all still out there, ready to go. That's the elephant in the room.
Can a president who is willing to make the choices Donald Trump made during the violence of January 6th ever be trusted with any position of authority in our great nation again? Let me assure every one of you this. Our committee understands the gravity of this moment, the consequences for our nation. We have much work yet to do, and we will see you all in September.
That's Liz Cheney, preceded by Adam Kinzinger at Thursday's January 6th committee hearing. We'll continue to monitor this investigation in the weeks and months ahead. We're back in a moment. Big thanks to Jerry Mitchell from the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.